myself, Shakil Garda, broadcasting Assalamu alaikum to all of you listeners who have just joined, those who will be watching this later on as well. We speaking from Johannesburg, and we are speaking about the country's Islamic language history, oral history, written history, in terms of the language systems and the use of the qalam or the pen in colloquial speak, in terms of what was written, how it was written, and what has been left behind for us to actually read and construe about the past, the very distant past, and the much more recent past as well, and then also onto the future. So we're going to be joined, inshallah, virtually in studio by Abdudayan Peterson, who is an archive researcher and a avid reader and understander of the history of Islam in South Africa, especially as far as the Cape is concerned, and Fahim Jackson, Fahim Roda Jackson, who is also dedicated to the art of calligraphy, and then later on Zunaida Wadiwala, who has also carved a niche for herself in the field of calligraphy, both in English and in Arabic, and has a certain take on the journey that one takes through their faith with the art of calligraphy. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our guests this afternoon. I must tell the listeners that this has been a discussion that we've been hoping to have from the beginning of Ramadan. And Alhamdulillah, the time has come. And here we are with one more weekend left, inshallah, before Eid, discussing, essentially where it all began in terms of the way Islam was taught in the very beginning, when Muslims were brought to the Cape. And I'm not going to tell you why they were brought. I'm not going to tell you anything about that because although I can do that, today it's for the guests to take us through that journey. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to greet my friends, my colleagues, my brothers, Riputas, Fanika, Abdudayan Peterson, and Fahim Jackson. Baie terima kasih dat julle hier is vanmiddag, en alhamdulillah, very, very happy to have both of you. Dayan, just note that you are muted before you do speak. And yes, assalamu alaikum. And hope that you guys are well. Shukran for your time. And I'm looking forward to this discussion, as I'm sure many other people are as well.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, brother Shakil and Abdul Dayan. Hope you're well, Shukran. Terima kasih for having us on the show.
Kasih for Allah. So, Dayan, if I could just ask you to paint a picture of South Africa 300 years ago, and how it is that Muslims happened upon this southern tip of the continent, and just very briefly how that then later on relates to our discussion today, which is about the calligraphy and the writing of the Cape, which then transcended the Cape and moved into the interior as well, from the texts to the tombstones. And that's going to be our discussion for the early part of today, before we bring Zunaida Wadiwala in to discuss some contemporary aspects of calligraphy, as well as how it connects to faith, inshallah.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Baie terima kasih dat u vir my genooi het. Just to move back to Cape Town around 370 years ago. The Cape was obviously inhabited by people, by the Khoi people, by different tribes and so on. And you had ships, of various nations passing by. You had the British, Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, and many others moving from the East Indies back to Europe, to the Americas and so on, transporting goods, spices. I think even there were a couple of mines in Southeast Asia as well, and so some minerals and heavy metals as well. But in the context of Cape Town itself, why are we here today? Why does Cape Town exist, as a city? The main reason for the founding of Cape Town, I would say, is water. There was water. There was a stream flowing down the mountain from where Platteklip Gorge is now, that led all the way down to the ocean, to where the harbor is now. And you had different streams and smaller rivers and springs feeding into that, creating a perfect place for a refreshment station. And so when the ships would pass by at, this point, this halfway point between east and west, I suppose, they would stop here, refuel, get some, there was, I think, fat-tailed sheep, other animals, and then also, collect the water at the Cape. And over time, the Dutch eventually managed to get it right to settle this land as a settlement, as a colonial settlement, which the Portuguese had tried about, I'd say, 140 years earlier, sort of. And unfortunately, rather, with the Battle of Salt River, they were defeated and it didn't occur. But when the Dutch, finally managed to settle Cape Town, as a city or as a refreshment station in around 1652, they needed other food sources, and so they started these plantations. So there was the Compagnie Tuin, the company's gardens, which I think is where the gardens is now. And they had, larger plantations and gardens and so on. And with this, you need labor. And, there's a whole lot of Dutch laws and, writing around why the koi could not be used, for the purpose of labor. It was their ground. And so they were quite rebellious, in being colonized by the Dutch. And so the Dutch needed slaves to work, the grounds here. And so they then started importing slaves from, West Coast Africa, East Coast Africa, from India, from Indonesia, all throughout the Indian Ocean. Just a few shocking places of origins. Slaves were brought from Surat as well. The Dutch had a fabriek, which is like a sort of, it's not per se a factory, but let's say a station, in Gujarat, and they took slaves from Surat. So there were Surti slaves, brought to the Cape. There were Zanzibari slaves brought to the Cape, slaves from Mozambique, slaves from all over Southeast Asia. And because many of these places were places where Islam was quite prevalent, Islam was the standard religion, or sometimes the religion of the state, or where these slaves came from, many Muslim slaves were brought to the Cape. And just because the Dutch colonized that land and stole these slaves from their places of origin, it doesn't mean that they were barbaric, uncivilized, unlettered, illiterate people. And so naturally, when you are taking these slaves, they bring with them the cultures that they were used to, the cultures that they belong to. And, many of those were writing cultures, food cultures, and so on. And so you see large contributions of those cultures brought to the Cape and then being nourished in the Cape, which contributes to the very popular Arabic Afrikaans writing culture that we had in Cape Town.
Yes, so I think, just to draw from what you said at the end there, is that these were not unlettered people. And many of these people responded to the first word that was revealed, which is Iqra, in the Quran, and followed in that tradition of reading and understanding more than just reading, actually, which we'll come to later on, which is the way we taught today is just to read and not really to understand Arabic. And why that is in South Africa generally. I won't only say the Cape. I would say that that in broad strokes is the reality for many South African, at least who are not from Arabian lands or from for example, Somalia, where perhaps their communities in South Africa today would be teaching their youth Arabic, and why we are all being left behind from that trajectory. But we are going to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll be speaking to Abdudayan Peterson, Fahim Rhoda Jackson, and Zunaida Musa Wariwala a bit later on about the lettered people who were brought to the shores of Cape Town, and then, of course, the culture and the learning heritage that we then inherited from them as they strove for Islam at a country that was described by Tuan Guru as the Cape of Sorrows. And yet, so Islam thrives, and so we say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to this very day. But that will be after the break, and inshallah, when we come back, we will delve deeper into this rich history that from which you and I to this day benefit. So please do stay tuned.
Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and Freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
In the aftermath of the tragic earthquakes in Syria and Turkey, thousands of survivors are struggling and in need of food, shelter, and life-saving aid. This Ramadan, take a closer look at the countless lives that have been turned upside down. You have the power to help. Your donation is the lifeline, a beacon of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. Please donate today. Visit donate.unhcr.org/RamadanZA.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Are you looking for a cross-border road transport company that is committed in achieving high safety standards, who is fast and efficient, and also excel in customer service? Gardi Global specializes in cross-border transport from South Africa to Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. Gardi Global, situated at 10 Daniel Road, Benrose, Johannesburg. For inquiries, contact our trained staff on 011-614-3108 or email info@gardiglobal.co.za. Safe, long haul into Africa is our business. Gardi Global Transport.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
الله لطيف بعبادي يرزق من يشاء وهو الكريم العزيز يا لطيف
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back after that commercial break. And we are going to jump right back through to the history of the Islam of the lettered people, the people that could read and write, were brought to the Cape and were eventually responsible for what is today known as a Muslim community that thrives and that understands Allah and knows Allah through the Quran that is written and through various texts that were written historically by students in their madaris or slums school or classes, and from which we today still benefit. We have Abdul Peterson, Fahim Jackson, and we'll be joined shortly by Zunaida Wadiwala as well to discuss this rich history of Islamic scholarship that thrived and continues to thrive. Fahim, assalamu alaikum. We'll turn to you now. So after having painted the picture of people arriving and being brought here not by choice, but having then come with skills and with the ability to recite Quran, to read Quran, and perhaps to write Quran as well, in the absence of the printing press, we then have today texts that we are able to refer to as the founding documents of the Islamic community at the Cape, and then therefore South Africa, the Cape of Sorrows. How does the Cape of Sorrows then become the very same place that we speak of today, in a very happy tone, with respect to Islam being established at the southernmost tip of the continent, in your understanding, insofar as calligraphy is concerned? And what have you found out, through your journey, in terms of what was written, how it was written, and how that looks like? I know we can't really show our listeners right now what it looks like, but at least from your point of view, how you've grown in your knowledge of this field of knowledge and work in terms of Islamic study.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Shukran for your question, Brother Shakil. So, Capes of Sorrows, yes. People like Tuan Guru Imam Abdullah bin Qadi Abdul Salam, he was a person that called this Cape the Cape of Sadness and Sorrows. And if you try to understand the context and the time that they were living in, the 18th, 19th century, you can understand that it wasn't a happy place really for Muslims to live at that time. Firstly, Islam was not an acceptable religion to follow. It was only the Dutch Church that was the main religion, and Islam had to be taught and practiced underground. And Tuan Guru Imam Abdullah bin Qadi Abdul Salam was one of the beacons of light here at the Cape, amongst many others. But he left a particular impact, I believe, which was a really great one, which is lasting up to this day. If you look at in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how Islam was established in times of real hardship that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to go through, that hardship, inna ma'al usri yusra, with difficulty comes ease. That is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of bloodshed, a lot of and obviously the Sahaba at that time, who were most dear and close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were those who were able to memorize the message, memorize the Quran, write it down, and teach it to others. So the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, some say, about 40 or so scribes or kutabul wahi around him. And if we look at in the Cape, there was no Islam. There was no, basically the Muslims came to barren land. They came here not by their free will. So like Brother Abdul Dayan says, they were slaves not only from Indonesia, but also from other parts of Africa, and now even India, Gujarat or Surat. So this is like interesting facts that some people might only have heard of today. But what is evident is that Islam was alive in these people's heritage, in their people's, no matter what culture they had, no matter what ethnicity or background they were from. Islam was alive, and it was alive because they were able to maintain and carry the message of Islam, even though all their belongings were taken from them, even though they were taken away from their houses, their land, their families, their palaces, or because people were from various backgrounds. They were political exiles. They were from royalty. They were from they were laymen as well. They were skilled people, and many of them were skilled people that were brought here, obviously for the purpose of building the infrastructure of the Cape. So the blood, sweat, and tears of our forefathers were used to build the Cape, but also um, through their sincerity, through the grief, through the hardship, through the oppression, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us Islam here in South Africa. You know, and the manuscripts that were left, I mean, we can't say we got I mean, if you're sitting with artifacts, maybe you know, I got a plate from this person, or I got a pair of trousers from, you know, from my great grandfather. It's not as valuable as saying I have a handwritten Quran. I have a manuscript teaching fiqh and aqidah. It takes us back into that time to understand how much these people had to go through to keep Islam alive. They couldn't just go download a book or a PDF and then print it off. They were they were the hard drives. They were the living, walking hard drives, and they had to print it with their hands. So it makes us appreciate this aspect of Islamic culture even more. The writing culture of Muslims, the writing culture of scholars of that time, where maybe we don't find it so much today. Now calligraphers are somewhat almost like there's a community of calligraphers, and they seem like they are just artists. But in that time, the scribes were scholars. They were highly qualified and highly knowledgeable people. I mean, Tuan Guru himself, a son of a qadi, you know, and many of these other shuyukh who came, even Sheikh Yusuf, who wrote many books. Sheikh Yusuf from Makassar. These are names that stand out in our history at the Cape. I mean, we have the Quran from Imam Rajab van Bugis. There's the Quran of the Raja of the Tambora. There are so many other mushafs and you know, books and manuscripts that we can find here in Cape Town, especially that link us to, and that can give us a better idea of our, you know, our standing and our how Islam was placed at that time.
So if you know, if we could now perhaps bring Dayan in and speak to you. You have these old manuscripts that some of which were found in the ceilings of Masajid. You know, for example, the Queen Victoria Mosque in Kapini Street, where Imam Moti Saban was said to have found documents and manuscripts. And you know, those that are passing from father to son or mother to daughter within family lines as well, that can be attributed to the earliest, as Fahim mentioned, the shuyukh of old. But then there's also people that learned in madrasa themselves and became students, and we're talking about not that long ago, creating and writing their own textbooks and so on. The Coples book being among those. So, Dayan, if you could perhaps tell us a bit about what you understand by that, and you know, your interaction, whether personally or you know, through others as well, that you've come across these type of documents or books which are not as old as what Fahim mentioned initially. So, but still form part of the writing tradition, and I would say perhaps come at the tail end of that before things become printed and you know, less self manufactured, for want of a better phrase, and you know, where then calligraphers then become artists, as Fahim mentioned. If you could just walk us through that a bit before our next break, inshallah.
I think we need to go to the madrasa of Tuan Guru. You know, we need to start there and look at, you know, what was the situation, what was the times like, and how did all of this occur. So I've mentioned that slaves were brought, you know, from places that had writing traditions, but also you had these political exiles that were also sent here, which was, you know, highly decorated scholars like Tuan Guru, like Tuan Said Alawi, like Sheikh Yusuf and Makassar, and so on. And with Tuan Guru coming here and, you know, being the luminary that he is, I'm not here to give the background of Tuan Guru. You know, there's numerous publications and books about him. But one of the key features is that he established the first known madrasa in Cape Town. And in this madrasa, being someone that was, you know, had a brilliant hand, as we can see in his Quran, he then taught his students, many of whom were slaves, people that entered the deen and so on, Europeans that also became Muslim. He taught them in his madrasa, and he taught them in the style that he was writing as well, and also in the language that he spoke, which was the lingua franca at the time, which is the Malay language. And you know, over time we start seeing repetitions of letters. So alif, 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 ba, 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 ta, ta, ta. We also see the Arkanul Iman, Arkanul Islam, and so on, which we can think of as the Qoples, you know, that which we memorize. You know, what are the 5 pillars of Islam, the 6 pillars of Iman? How do you make wudu? You know, what is the Shurut al-Salah, and so on. And over time, as you move onwards to around the 1840s, we then see the Qoples books even being produced in the local Cape Dutch language, but using the way that Tuan Guru wrote as well, which can be seen or thought of as the first Afrikaans text that we've got. And over time, as you move, you know, further and further along the timeline, and you look at these kitabs that families have got and that you find in the ceilings of mosques and so on, you start finding more texts being written in this Cape Dutch, moving into an Afrikaans language. These the Qoples kitabs of, you know, what is Iman, what is Islam. You then also start noticing they would have it in Arabic, and then they would give a translation underneath in Afrikaans, which is both for the muallim to teach in his madrasa, and also for the student to write or to copy from, or to make their notes from while they are learning. And so that is really the Qoples tradition that we've got in Cape Town, which is that which we are meant to memorize. But part of memorizing is also writing. As you read and as you write, you start to memorize.
So before our break, can you give us an example of a phrase or a extract that you can remember or recall from having read one of these books that would be Arabic and then Afrikaans as well, before we take a break?
I think it's the Arkanul. Wat is die Arkanul Islam? Die Arkanul Islam is 5. Salah. Sure. I can't remember exactly now, but I mean, you can see, you know, the type of language that was being used at the time, you know, speaking about die hoge Allah en bewaar van al wat sleg is, and, you know, die hoge Jannat, and, you know, as Allah vergun, you know, the types of words that we attribute to the old people speaking in their daily life was the language used in Islamic literature in the Cape. And so if you think of the type of Afrikaans that the older people were speaking, they were actually speaking a very high religious form of Afrikaans, and not just the slang that we call it today.
Yes, so I think after the break, we'll come back and we'll bring all 3 our guests with us back into studio, and close up a discussion that was quite brief about the ocean of knowledge that was developed locally, but also how that links up to other lands that people came from, and how that links to one's journey through the faith, which we will then explore after the next break, inshallah.
Us at our new office space on 31 West Street, Houghton Estate, Johannesburg. The new AMA office will provide a space to connect, share, volunteer, and donate in the heart of the community. Find out more about how you can make an impact with your zakah this Ramadan. Office hours are 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. daily. Call us on 0100 722 262. Africa Muslims Agency. Empowering, educating, inspiring.
From samosas and half moons to cook sisters and roti, everything between iftar and sehri makes sunfoil cooking oil an essential part of your Ramadan. Approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a healthy diet, this blessed month, give your family the best with sunfoil, because tradition just tastes better.
Online schooling? Why not? Kurtuba Online Academy is the leading global online Islamic school from grade R to matric, offering South African caps and international syllabus. And it doesn't stop there. We also offer online madrasa for every grade. For more information, visit www.kurtubaonline.co.za. Kurtuba Online Academy, the leading global online Islamic school.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the final segment of the Heritage Show. And we were discussing just before the break the tradition of learning and writing that took place at the Cape, and also how that translated into the way people spoke, the way people thought, and the construction essentially of a community and a society based off of religious principles and knowledge systems that we still benefit today. We must also know that after the Cape was an established Muslim community with its own learning style that united people from various lands under the banner of Islam, irrespective of ethnicity and creed and so on. This community then began to travel into the Eastern Cape and then into the interior of Kimberley, later Durban, Johannesburg, and the many other towns and sort of hamlets and villages that exist across the country, to then form an early Muslim community that we can speak of, before we speak about the more modern contemporary understanding of Islam and the knowledge system that we'd use today. So we are joined this afternoon by Abdudayan Peterson, Fahim Jackson, and Zunaida Musawaiwala to discuss this tradition of learning and writing in South Africa, and how this then relates to our contemporary understanding of an Islamic identity and Islamic knowledge identity. We are most grateful to have you with us this afternoon, Zunaida. Assalamu alaikum. We have lost Fahim. He's just reconnecting. I believe that none of you are strangers to one another. So, it's a great pleasure to have all three of you. So we come back from speaking about, the early luminaries, and we know about Sheikh Yusuf, Tuanguru, and the other shuyukh that were mentioned as well, whose biographies are often misunderstood or even overlooked when speaking about, the early Muslims and the early shuyukh that established Islam in the country. And then, later on, we then walked into understanding how the more recent texts that exist are evidence of the literary and the linguistic culture of South Africa and of the Cape that we understand to be, as Dayan said, the way the old people speak, but really it was really evidence of the way they were taught, the way they were taught to think, and an epistemology of Islamic thought at the time that today exists, but in a different form, through globalization and the fact that knowledge can come from all places, and that we can come to know Allah in many ways that don't necessarily have the same traditional or old school, old dates flavor that it once had. And we have Zunaida here with us, who is an avid lover and researcher, and someone passionate about Islam and about calligraphy and about art and how these converge. And she has a very long bio, which I won't be able to read right now. But I'd rather speak to you directly, Sunaida, and understand, your journey of calligraphy, insofar as you understand it, linking not only to South Africa's history, but to a global understanding of Allah and a knowledge toward Allah that one gains from benefiting from the modern day offering that we have, to learn calligraphy and to learn about reading and writing, that perhaps people didn't have before, and hoping that we have the same level of steadfastness that they had, despite the resources that they may have lacked, or that it seems that they have lacked, but really the evidence that has been found says completely differently. So assalamu alaikum to you and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Shakil. And assalamu alaikum to your guests, Fahim and Tayan, as well as
Wa
to your
alaikum
listeners.
salam.
So, listening to Dayan first and then Fahim, I was so moved and I was trying to link what it is that binds us to the people that had settled in South Africa. And there's two things. The first I'd like to say is, and I'm going to try and say this in Afrikaans, but ons moet ons Afrikaanse taal waardeer. En die mense wat so sterk, despite die moeilikheid wat hulle gehad het en hoe maklik dit is vir ons. So ons moet alles waardeer. Secondly, I think the ties that bind us. And I'm putting this into the context and the perspective from which the first speaker spoke, and how the people predominantly of Islamic backgrounds from countries and provinces such as Gujarat in India and Indonesia and all the other places that were mentioned, who came to the Cape and who came with the background of knowledge. So what I'm going to speak about is even before they came. What is it that they had was so strong and brought it to the Cape Town and brought it to us, where it is still strong and thriving today. And the thing that I can think of that comes to my mind is the hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which was narrated by Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, and this hadith is muttafaqun alayh, meaning it is agreed upon and it is found in both Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. And the hadith is a simple one, but as follows: خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. The best amongst you is he who learns the Quran and he who teaches it. So if you had to put that into perspective, these founding fathers, I'm going to call them that, the people that had landed in Cape Town, they understood that hadith, they lived it, they practiced it, they took the branches of it related to the Quran, and they were called Ahl Quran, people of the Quran, because they brought with it the Arabic language, meaning the everything that is concerned with the Arabic language, the sarf, the nahu. Then they brought with it the understanding of the Arabic language, the meaning of it, the meaning of the Quran Kareem, the meaning of the Ahadith, which, as we know, forms the basis of our Sharia. And then the tafsir of the Quran, because what are we without ulum al-Quran, ulum al-Hadith, the explanation as we understand it today, and then also the recitation of the Quran, the tajweed of the Quran, which is another vital and important link to the Hadith. And then lastly, the writing of the Quran. Now, the writing of the Quran is what I'm going to be speaking about, and the essence of, in the little time that we have, that is the ultimate art of Islamic calligraphy and Islamic art in general. Now, as Fahim was saying, calligraphers of today might be known as artists, but I do feel that it is our duty as calligraphers, if we are going to write the word of the Quran, it is important that we understand or we acquire a knowledge of the history of the Quran, and we cannot do that without acquiring a knowledge of the Arabic language. So if we had to take this ultimate art, the art of calligraphy, and call it the ultimate art of Islamic art, why is that? It's because we are writing the most sacred of words, right? The words of the Quran Kareem. And what are those words? Those are words that contain a profound message. They're meant to be taken in by the eye, comprehended by the mind, and settled into the heart and the soul. Now, with that context in mind, let us move right back to where Arabic, or where the art of Arabic calligraphy started. And that was during the time of our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we know, placed a great emphasis on spreading of knowledge in the form of reading and in the form of writing. The word calligraphy in essence means the art of making handwriting beautiful. And in Arabic, the word that we use is khat, or al-khattul Arabi, which means Arabic calligraphy. Now this, in a nutshell, 29 letters of the Arabic alphabet, some of them which are able to be joined, some of which them are separate, but they have a beautiful form because when they join, they use different geometric shapes, different geometric forms, structure, size, proportion. But through extension, through overlapping, this is where the art is formed. So Arabic, Arabic calligraphy, unlike any other art, has a deep and a sacred origin of which I just spoke about, right? Now, if we look at the origin after or maybe just after the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and during the reign of the third Khalif, once again, Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, there were the scribes of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the most prominent from those is Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. He was, during the lifetime of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the personal scribe of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Arabic calligraphy at that time was used as a means of communication. And then, during the time of anhu, together with other scribes, compiled the Quran into a mushaf form. And that is where the art of calligraphy actually developed. Moving along, we had then the Umayyad period in which Arabic calligraphy was further developed. And then we come to the Abbasid era. And during the Abbasid era, this is where the cursive script was actually founded. Rules were put into place by Ibn Muqalla. He was an eminent advisor at that time. And he developed certain rules. From there, we went onto the reign of the Ottoman. And during the Ottoman period, this is where Arabic calligraphy sort of gained a new life form. There were different forms of Arabic calligraphy, but new texts, new styles were then developed. For example, the Diwani script was developed during the Ottoman era. And there are well-known calligraphers from there. I think most prominent there would be also Hafiz Osman. The Ottoman period, the pronunciation was Osman, or we could pronounce it in Arabic form, which would then be Uthman, but it's the same name, different variations, different pronunciations. So he then developed the Diwani, the Jali Diwani script. Arabic calligraphy reached culmination. There were more than 80 styles by now. Arabic calligraphy then developed where it was used to form decorations in sacred places, the palaces, the masajid. Most importantly, texts of the Quran were developed. At present, we have, I think, calligraphers who have added their own sort of style, their own sort of text, but we have developed calligraphy into what it is now. We might not be using it as a form of communication, but most certainly it is alive in the form of the Quran. It is alive in the form of architecture, decoration, and art, as it is now commonly seen. I think
yes, so I think it's important, you know, that you place that in context of, you know, a time where our own Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was an unlettered person, you know, and yet from his faith tradition thrives a community that does record its knowledge via writing and via reading, without which perhaps we'd have an oral tradition that would perhaps not have stood the test of time, but Allah had wisdom behind it. Of course, I cannot say that while believing that Allah knew and Allah had a plan for us today to be able to understand this Islam that we do today. How does the period of the arrival of Muslims at the Cape fit into the historical chronology of the Ottoman Empire? If I could ask either Dayan or Fahim, you know, in terms of what Sunaida mentioned, where you know, there are obviously political things happening across the globe at the time, and depending who reigned, that would determine what emphasis was placed on what aspect of culture and of knowledge, and of course today people crave and thrive and you know, yearn for a time where the leaders that we have would be that way inclined to actually promote the spirit of Islam and the deepening of knowledge of Islam. But of course today it's come to be a private thing that one pursues on their own, as Unaida mentioned, people that want to become familiar with it and become artists or become scribes and so on. Fahim, this question is directed at you in terms of the chronology of the people that arrived here and how this fits into the global historical picture. And that'll be before our last break. And when we come back, we'll wrap all this up, inshallah. And I'm sure listeners are as well, that this was clearly not enough time to delve into such a rich topic about the knowledge systems that existed and that continues to exist. So please take it away, inshallah. You are muted, if you could just unmute for. Yes.
Sorry, I had kids in the background. I had to mute myself.
No, please. Thanks.
So regarding the, how Arabic calligraphy influenced, the society through, through the leadership of the various Islamic empires. Now, we didn't have an Islamic empire here in Cape Town, and that's why the Ottoman Empire at the time, they felt they needed to send a scholar here, like Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi, as we all know. But if you look out throughout the Islamic history, calligraphy was given a lot of value. It was given actually of the most important values, because Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an, there's a saying of him where he says that you have to teach your children calligraphy, teach them to write, teach them Arabic writing. فَإِنَّهُ مِنْ أَهَمِّ الْأُمُورِ وَأَعْظَمَ السُّرُورِ, because it's of the most important matters and it brings great joy. So, even Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an advising us since the beginning of Islam to put importance to teaching writing. And you can see that the Arabic calligraphy was as influenced architecture. It influenced the way it influenced obviously the artistic landscape of Muslim cultures. And especially through the masahif, especially through the mushafs. I mean, that's where you will find the gold. I mean, literally the gold. I'm not talking about only the gold of illumination, the illumination that the pattern work that surrounds the text. But if you look at Tuan Guru and people who came here and wrote in Cape Town, there's not so much decoration. There's not so much emphasis put on decoration. The Ottomans actually had waqfs in place. They had a waqf in place to support calligraphy, to support the calligraphers, the scribes. And if you look at someone like Sheikh Hamdullah was in the 15th century, I think it was. He is regarded as the father of Ottoman calligraphy, the father of Ottoman calligraphy. So Sheikh Hamdullah, just a small story, just to give context to and understanding to the greatness of the Arabic script. Sheikh Hamdullah was always asked by Sultan Bayazid to sit close to him and to sit in front. Whenever there were any gatherings or meetings of ministers and so on, Sheikh Hamdullah would be present. And the Sultan was actually his student as well. He was his calligraphy student, and he used to hold the ink pot for him. He had so much respect for Sheikh Hamdullah. And then at one point, the ministers asked the Sultan, why do you always honor this person? Why do you always bring this person, to the front of the gatherings? Why you always ask him to sit in front and next to you and close to you, where there are ministers and there are other people in government that you don't honor the same? And he sensed a little bit of jealousy, and the Sultan asked the ministers. He brought them all together. He asked them, the governors, sorry. He asked him, if I ask any of you, do you have Quran at home? Yes, they have Quran. Where do you place that Quran, when you recite it? After you recite it, where do you put it? And then they said, well, we put it on the highest place, we put it on the high shelf. And he said, how do you treat that Quran when you take it off the shelf? He said, no, we kiss it. we hold it close to our hearts. And then he asked them, so how would you like me to treat the writer of the Quran, the person who's a scribe, that person? So these people, like Tuan Guru, for example, they should be actually brother Shafiq Morton actually says that he believes Tuan Guru should be given the freedom of the city of Cape Town, because he should be regarded as a national hero. Spent time on Robben Island, wrote great manuscripts, many copies of the Quran and other manuscripts from memory, and established the first masjid in Cape Town, established the first madrasa. I mean, there's so many things that can come out of this, but it was the writing, it was the calligraphy, and unfortunately, not many people has carried on with that knowledge and taught and kept it alive, and that's what we're trying to do today.
Yes, so inshallah we'll speak, in a couple of years' time of a resurgence of the not just the artistic form of calligraphy, but actually of it as a communication tool. Even if it is a sticker on WhatsApp that says Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak, which Fahim quite cleverly created just before Ramadan began in the Tuan Guru writing style, or the Janubi script as he has coined it or called it. Inshallah, we'll be speaking about you one day as someone that did that. I think it's important to take that first step, and each of you have done that in terms of deciding, this needs to be prioritized. There are no wakafs in our country, so let's speak to Okaf South Africa. Let's get that to be a priority. Whether you are there we have it. A few examples. Fahim, if you could just tell us what exactly we're looking at there.
In Arabic calligraphy terminology, we would say this is a kurasa. So this is my humble attempt in creating a workbook that inshallah people will be able to use to learn how to write the style of Arabic calligraphy that was practiced by the early Muslims of the Cape. So this is some work in progress. As you can see, it is in pencil and also in ink. So I'm using traditional tools like the ink and bamboo columns and so on and so forth, as people can see. So we are keeping the tradition alive, like you say. And although we're calling it Janubi, Janubi is referring to the southern style. You have Khat al-Maghribi and Mashriqi styles, Eastern and Western Islamic styles of calligraphy. So we are using the term Janubi to refer to the Arabic styles of calligraphy that was first introduced in South Africa, in Cape Town.
So of course it's nearly time to wrap up, and I hate to say that, but it is what it is, and I think we'll probably have to bring you guys back in future. But I want to end off with the ultimate ending that we all have one day, which is death, and the certainty of that, and how that links to calligraphy as well, which we'll get to. So hold on, but I would like to ask, from your perspective, Zunaida, in terms of someone that is today navigating the old and the new, and presenting, at workshops and trying to make people understand this calligraphy not only as an art form but as a way to actually reach Allah and to seek Allah and to seek Allah's guidance. What stands out for you as maybe a moment or an experience, or even a priority that you believe we should be putting on in terms of promoting this and understanding this, that you draw from your understanding of history but also of the present, as someone that is relatively young and understands a modern society that we live in, and just bearing in mind that we will be first at the end speaking about the ultimate moat, and speaking to Dayan then at that point, before we wrap up. And sorry, if you could just speak up a bit louder. We did have a slight issue hearing earlier. Yes.
Sorry about that. Apologies. I think, Shakil, your question is so relevant and so important, because everything is judged actions. And the hadith which our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has spoken about, also authentic and comes first actually in most kitabs, is innamal a'malu binniyat. So actions are judged according to the intention. And if your intention is in the correct place, and if you are learning, if you are promoting calligraphy for the pleasure of Allah, to spread messages of hope, to spread the messages of the Quran, then inshallah you will have that reward. And that, I think, is the only thing that you can take with you when you die. Sadaqatul Jariyah, or perpetual reward, is what we are all hoping for. And what better way then to be from Ahl Quran, to spread the messages and the meaning and the attributes of the Quran through your calligraphy. And I think that is, for me, that is how I would frame your question.
Inshallah, we find ourselves among those that ikra, that respond to the command to read, and also to write, and also to communicate, and to seek to understand. Because I mean, understanding comes only after wanting to understand. It is said in the Quran that every soul shall taste death, and many, like Stephen Covey would, for example, tell people to begin with the end in mind. Many people's first interaction with today, modern people that don't really read manuscripts might find in the Maqbara or the Kubas or the Kubur and so on, that there are Arabic writings that one may not be able to really understand or read. But essentially, we spoke about this being from text to tombstones, and on the tombstones, you've been a tomb raider and someone that actually has gone out and understood what was written on there, how it was written, the style in which it was written, and the way they would describe the death and the moment of death, and the way today sometimes it seems very unsophisticated, the way we type a WhatsApp broadcast to convey that message, and our gravestones are typed on a Word document and then placed on some graphic and printed. So we do have to wrap up soon and put an end to the show. But before we do so, let's have a discussion quickly from you about the ultimate journey and how this looks in terms of Arabic writing at the Maqbara.
I think I'll just speak to one tombstone in particular, one that's really dear to my heart, is a tombstone of a woman by the name of Rosetta of the Cape. This is in the Tanabaru cemetery in Buka. On there, as I mentioned, she was a slave woman. She was born into slavery. She lived the life. She had children. She was married and so on. And all colonial records reflect her as being a slave woman. Her death record reflects her as Rosetta, a slave woman. Yet, when you go to the Tanabaru and you look at this tombstone written in a mix of Arabic, Dutch, and Malay language all together, she's actually referred to as Nyai Rosetta. Nyai is a Malay word meaning respected or older woman. Another interesting point about this is that she is referred to as Sahibu Hadha al-Qubur, which is a colloquialism of the owner of this grave. So if you think of her as being owned in life, in death, she is an owner. She owns that plot of ground for as long as it survives, as long as the tombstone survives and as long as the grave is there. It is her grave. Nobody can take her qabr away from her. So it's really beautiful to see how the tombstone, through calligraphy and through writing, can honor somebody and reflect, these different nuances for such a long period. She died in the 1840s. It's now 2023. 180 years later, she's still being remembered, and the tool that was used to perpetuate this memory is writing, chiseling, and the tombstone.
So inshallah, with that, we all need to bear that in mind in terms of the longevity of the akhirah, and also how time is spent on the earth in terms of seeking knowledge and producing knowledge. And there we have Kullu Nafsin Dha'iqatul Maut in the movie script as penned by Fahim Rhoda Jackson, a stark reminder of our ultimate journey, and something that we can maybe look forward to. If you were a slave and if you were someone that was shackled, then that is a release from the dunya. In the context of which Dayan just mentioned that, although his face is quite perturbed by what I initially said, in the context of for many, that was the release. That was a beautiful thing to pass from one world to the next, inshallah. So we'll hopefully have another discussion in the future. But for now, Bait Ramakasi, shukran and jazakallah khair to all of you for being on this heritage show and for your time in delving into these areas of knowledge that are so sorely missed and will hopefully become mainstream, inshallah, in the future, and not only on WhatsApp stickers. So shukran to all of you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Afwan. Sama-sama. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Terima kasih. Waalaikumsalam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.